Welcome to the Cyber 24 podcast, the weekly pod dedicated to helping business and governmental leaders better understand the often intimidating topic of cybersecurity so you can make better decisions for your organization. My name is Marty Carpenter of 24/9. I work in strategic communication, public affairs, and government relations, and I'm joined today by our guest cybersecurity expert, Rob Shavell, who is the CEO and co-founder of Abine and DeleteMe. Rob, thanks so much for joining us today from Connecticut.
Thanks for having me, Marty.
Tell me a little bit about your company, about DeleteMe. What do you do? How did you sort of get involved in this? And what's your mission?
Our mission is pretty simple. It's but large. It's to protect your online privacy and lower your digital footprint. And what that means is that we provide tools and services to stop all of the sale and reuse and unauthorized use of the data that every day all of us are generating as we go about our normal lives, which are increasingly digital normal lives.
So that sort of jumps in after the fact that we've given away our data. You're the way that we can stop that then from being sold and shared on to the next group. Is that an accurate depiction of it?
Well, we have both proactive and sort of post facto or reactive services. So we actually have two products. One is called Blur, and that is a product that you add to your internet browser, and in effect, it helps you not give out your personal information in the very first place. So, for example, if you've ever shopped online, I'm guessing nobody has. That's listening. If you've ever registered for a account at a website, what Blur will do if you have it installed in your Chrome browser or your Firefox browser or what have you, is it will pop up as you're asked to enter that, to fill out that form, and will give you a choice that you didn't have before, and it'll say, hey, do you want to give them your real email, or do you want to give them what we call a masked email? Apropos, we did name masked emails before the pandemic, so we're sticking with them. But it basically gives you an alias, and that email can route privately back to your personal email, but it allows you to give third parties, other companies, other websites, effectively something that you control that's sort of more disposable than your real personal email. And we take that same approach with your phone number. So we'll give you a new phone number to give to that merchant or that website, and we'll do the same thing if you're a premium customer for your credit card, and we'll actually generate you a new Visa or MasterCard on the fly with a number that is not your real number, but is charged back to your real personal card. So in that way, we have a tool that proactively protects your identity and the privacy of the personal information that you're constantly asked to give out. So that's the before part of it, and then you were just alluding to the other side of it, which is, well, I've already given out all my information. It's all over the internet. How do I clean it up? What do I do? And that's where our other service comes in, called DeleteMe. And what DeleteMe does is it goes out, finds a lot of that information at a list of over, I think, 50 to 100 data brokers that are known to aggregate all that personal information that we've given out, buy it from different sources, scrape it from online media, social media, what have you, and put it into a profile on all of us that they go resell to anyone, be it a business, a hacker, I think that we're going to talk about later in the podcast, or just an individual that's snooping around trying to find information about us, our families, our residences, our net worth, our relatives, that kind of thing. And DeleteMe will go out, find where your information is exposed, and then remove it for you, and keep on doing that all year long for one subscription price.
Really interesting stuff. I've been the bad guy in some of those things, not on the hacker side, but I've run political campaigns, and that's definitely an organization. Any political campaign is going to go buy as much data as they can for their electorate and try to figure out exactly how to target those folks.
PACs are a really good example of, they're buying as much, every election, whether it's, as you know, Marty, whether it's local or national, is buying as much data as they possibly can to influence voters. And I think what is interesting is to figure out what's acceptable use of our data in those instances, and what is not. And clearly, in America, that debate is very much in motion right now, because nobody can figure out, hey, how much did the Russians really buy, or did they buy this, and how did they use that data on us to influence us and the election results and all that kind of stuff. But it's a completely legitimate use of data for registered U.S. or domestic companies to try to get their messages out around a fair vote. So it's just an interesting area of how our data is monetized and used, and where we should draw lines.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, even from a political standpoint. You have to kind of, you might have the data and you might be able to target people, but you still have to fine tune, when am I getting past the tipping point and I'm making people mad when all I really want them to do is vote for my guy, right? So that's interesting stuff. And, they say data is the new oil, is how I've always heard it phrased, that it's really valuable. And, it's interesting how eagerly we all give it away in so many instances, sometimes knowingly, sometimes unknowingly. I also want to talk to you today about this general idea that's been floating around really since, not throughout the entire pandemic, but since the vaccines were introduced, and that's this idea of vaccine passports. So COVID has changed a great deal about the world, and we're still, I think, sorting through what the lasting changes are. But one thing that people keep bringing up are these vaccine passports, particularly when it comes to travel. And, you hear, hey, we've all been cooped up for a while, and now people are anxious to get off to Hawaii or Europe or wherever. And everywhere you go, it seems like there is a labyrinth of different tests and requirements and things you need in order to get somewhere, and that the vaccine should sort of take care of that. So we get this idea of vaccine passports. But those come with a host of potential issues. So I guess, one, could you give us just a general idea of what, are we all talking about the same thing when we say vaccine passport? And then what are some of the potential issues and privacy concerns that come with implementing something like that, if that becomes more of the normal procedure?
So we've done some work, being a privacy company that's following these trends. We've done some work to try to figure out some of the data behind these questions, and it is fast evolving. Every month a different percentage of the U.S. is vaccinated, and it varies dramatically by state, and then you open that up to the rest of the world. So we have a very evolving situation. But when we last did a survey, which is about 40 days ago, what we found was interesting, because about 30% of the vaccinated folks had a paper receipt that they were using as a proof of vaccination, whereas only 1.2% of all people we surveyed, this is over 1,000 people, had gotten any kind of digital receipt, something on their phone, an app, or what a representation of their proof of vaccination in some kind of digital form. And so what I think we're seeing in reality is what we've frankly seen throughout the pandemic, which is, in the United States, we are a very fragmented nation that is trying to do the right things, but there is no central oversight and protocol for the behaviors that we're trying to create. So you've got other countries asking for different kinds of proofs, which when you travel, which would be considered a vaccine passport, and some of them are accepting paper receipts, some of them are accepting digital receipts, and some of them are not accepting any of those and insisting on retest and the proof of a retest, either in some form that they approve of. In other words, a retest at an airport, or a retest at their approved healthcare facility once you enter their country. So I think very much what you would expect if you thought that the world was a complicated, evolving system with no real rules is what is actually playing out, which is every country, when it comes to travel, is making up their own protocols, and what we call a vaccine passport is literally being made up, as a set of rules by each country as we go. And I just heard today that even in Europe, notoriously easygoing about their summer vacations and so on, is starting to implement travel restrictions between countries that have had very warm relationships in the past, like Spain, France, and Portugal. So I think the situation is evolving, and everyone is concerned about these quote-unquote new variants.
Yeah. I know going back even, man, it seems like 10, 15 years now, that we were talking here in Utah about a movement toward electronic health records, and a way to say, hey, if you need to go to this hospital in Utah, they've got your health records, but if you're on vacation in Florida and there's some kind of problem and you go to the hospital, that they can access those same records. And it was always this battle, the same kind of general battle that we're seeing, I think, in many respects now. Like, well, you can have, it's not that I don't want you to have my medical records for that purpose. It's the concern that goes with that, to suddenly, what happens when my medical records are compromised and exposed, and suddenly everyone gets to know which operation I've had or what kind of condition I've had in the past or even currently. So I'm wondering how does something like this fit into a vaccine passport, fit in with HIPAA laws that govern so much of our medical data across the country?
Yeah, it's a great question. As a privacy company that sees all kinds of data that we wouldn't expect show up in data brokers' profiles about us, and this is data that we may not have really recognized that we were giving our consent to be collected, or certainly to be resold in some kind of aftermarket. So it is a concern. It's concerning for us because we see a trend towards more and more information being, correctly aggregated and correlated across a wider and wider range of attributes about us. So in effect, what was the old phone book, which some of us aging podcast people are familiar with, and some of the younger ones are not, has become a very, very detailed dossier. And what we are concerned about is, hey, if we have all these concepts around healthcare passports, and indeed we start to use proof of vaccination for things domestically, like can we go to a rock concert, can we get into a sports event, things that many of us do even if we don't travel internationally. What happens with that data, and will it eventually show up as part of our profile? And then if it does, what are the harms? Would it show that will there be discrimination against people that chose not to get vaccinated? And in what shape or form? And will certain vaccinations be considered worse or better? And will that then determine other decisions that algorithms make, and so on? So I think our concern isn't that we need a new HIPAA, which is, broadly speaking, the legislation that protects the privacy of healthcare records. It's that I don't think HIPAA anticipated the amount of data sharing that we're not sure yet, but may be required by businesses and other institutions in their quest to kind of keep their communities safe in a game that is changing every couple of weeks.
Well, the good news about that is if something's not quite right, all it takes is an act of Congress cooperating together to sort it all out. I'm interested, though, in this idea of, like, if there are whatever the central database is, or even if it's sort of a decentralized but cooperating and coordinating database, where maybe my healthcare provider knows I got vaccinated and your healthcare provider knows you got vaccinated, and they communicate. If there's some sort of, like, entity. Like I think of that as like government or healthcare entity that has that data. But there has to be a communication point where you brought up, hey, if you're going to go to a rock concert or you're going to travel somewhere, does the airline need to have access to see that you're vaccinated? Does the arena, does the ticket seller, how many businesses then have to have access to that? And with each one of those, there's an attack vector all of a sudden that opens up. So what kind of concerns does this pose for those companies then that would have to potentially access that kind of information? And what about businesses, those businesses that then take on some kind of liability in putting themselves in that position?
It's a great point. And I think businesses that are going to put up effectively health walls around their services that you have to pass through, a toll gate, if you will, which I'm not here to speak on whether it's a good idea or a bad one, but certainly, right. I think if they do, they are by nature going to be collecting data, and the temptation is going to be more data is better. And I would, my message to businesses when they ask us about these issues is, no, more data is not better. And you do not need, it will not help your revenue to collect and store information related to the health and the past health of your customers. And so really think about something that is not stored. Like, you can do a check on everybody for safety concerns, but you do not need to store every piece of data about everybody that passes through your walls, so to speak. And I think a lower tech, less data storage centric view of the world is what is something the U.S., broadly speaking, really needs to incorporate more on a day-to-day basis.
So what do you think will be the biggest driving factor as to whether or not vaccine passports become the norm? Because I can see it being businesses assessing risk and saying, we got to require this so that we have checked a box and we aren't liable, right? There are all kinds of things we have to fill out and things we have to do to protect a business's liability that, are really just cumbersome for the user. Or do you think it'll be driven more by public attitudes? And you and I had this discussion briefly before we started recording. You're on the East Coast, I'm in Utah, and we're probably having two different end of pandemic experiences. Life's pretty much back to normal here. We're 70% vaccinated as of yesterday or 2 days ago. And I don't remember the last time I put a mask on. I guess maybe when I had to go to a doctor's appointment. Health facilities still require it. But other than that, it's almost to the point where, I've got this coming up, I better go find a mask, not, I have one on me at all times and a packet of 10 of them in my car so that I've got one wherever I go. So I guess that's a long way of asking, what's going to be the driver, or will it be a combination of the two? Liability is going to drive this, and risk assessment, or sort of public attitudes of, we're done with this, there's a vaccine, everyone who went and got vaccinated is protected, and we're moving on.
Yeah, I think it's going to be driven by a combination of three things. One is liability, lawsuits. Lawyers are the instigators of so many things in our beloved nation, and they will be the ones that in hard dollar terms influences business behaviors and policy the quickest. And then public attitudes and government, sort of government CDC recommendations. I think, they're both intertwined, but they're different. And I think that will follow what we've seen in the past, which is a very state-centric dynamic where, you probably will never need a proof of vaccine to go to a high school football game or in Texas, but you very well may need one, in Massachusetts.
Yeah, it's so interesting. This all sort of happened very suddenly, and you could tell after a short time the real complicated part was going to be the unraveling of it, and how do we, adjust all the way back to, or as close as we will ever get back to normal society.
And I think that's really even beyond these detailed trends, the real question, I think, is the science here, which is still poorly communicated and badly known. Despite all of the experts that we have globally, the data still stinks, and we can't really use it to make decisions. And no wonder everybody is following a slightly different protocol and believes in their protocol, because it's very hard for science to make this simple enough that we have a playbook to follow. And I think these variants, and whether this thing is actually going away and is going to die, or it's going to be with us for years, is the big elephant in the room open question, which nobody can answer right now.
Yeah, interesting stuff. All right, time to take a break, but first a reminder, Cyber24 is presented each week by our friends at Valcom. Valcom is a Utah-based IT solutions and services provider with the drive for getting IT right. From ironclad security to computing and beyond, Valcom's 35-plus years means they have the experience and the expertise to help your business from desktop to the data center. Check them out at VLCM.com. Back with more on the Cyber24 podcast presented by Valcom right after this. The demand has never been greater for business owners and IT professionals to invest in intelligent security camera systems. At the intersection of physical security and cybersecurity, an increasing number of organizations struggle to take a proactive approach to surveillance. Verkada's all-in-one physical security platform makes this decision easy with features like plug-and-play installation, centralized management, secure remote access to cameras, and smart features and alerts. Smarter security starts with Verkada. Learn more at vlcmtech.com/Verkada. That's vlcmtech.com/VERKADA. If you're looking for protection from uncontrolled access, Salto can deliver the perfect solution, tailored to your exact requirements to provide you with all the security, convenience, and control you need. With Salto, you install access control in a wire-free environment, so there's no need to hardwire the building. Because Salto works on a virtual network, you can enroll or replace a lost key within seconds, making reprogramming and rekeying a problem of the past. See how Salto can make your access control and building security simpler and safer at vlcmtech.com/Salto. That's vlcmtech.com/SALTO. Welcome back to the Cyber24 podcast presented by Valcom. We continue our discussion with Rob Shavell, the CEO and co-founder of Abine and DeleteMe. And Rob, I just wanted to get your take on this while we've got your security and privacy and all things cybersecurity brain with us. There was some news just in the last day or so that the gang behind the ransomware attack, this colossal ransomware attack, a group called Revil, says they've targeted a large U.S. IT firm with 1 million systems compromised, and they're demanding a ransom. I think this is the highest one that I've seen in a long time, $70 million. So I'd love just to get your take on, maybe give us some insight on what's going on here, and were you shocked by that dollar amount?
Inflation is upon us. I'm not shocked by anything anymore.
Yeah.
Though it's certainly amazing to see hackers emboldened enough to be able to ask for small fortunes now, and to be able to do so on such a frequent basis that you could imagine them hiring a CFO and having a nice monthly revenue income that could be attributable to a publicly listed company on the New York Stock Exchange.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I was just thinking of the dollar amount itself. We had the Colonial Pipeline attack, which it's hard to track time anymore, but I think it was like 4 or 5 weeks ago, and we had people filling up garbage bags with gasoline, and they came after a $5 million ransom, which was paid. And then I think they got back like the FBI got back $2.5 million of it. And you're like, oh, well, hey, there's some good news. We figured out how to, do something. The FBI's got some trick up their sleeve where they're getting some of this money back. Maybe we're in this fight. And then the next thing you know, we're at $11 million, I think, for another one that popped up a couple weeks ago, and then $70 million here. It's just I can only say it's like a baseball salaries, right? I remember when someone making, $1 million a year was a big deal, and then A-Rod got $250 million, and now guys are signing $330 million contracts. We're seeing that same type of jump, and I just wonder to what extent there's some calibration here, like trying to figure out what's the limit of the market and what is the sweet spot to ask for, because if you can get 70, you go for 70, I guess.
I think so. I mean, I think it's a really interesting. I mean, I'd be interested if any economists are studying this. It may be too fresh a market, but they're certainly trying to. What we have is a classic exercise in supply, demand, and price pressure over time, right? If these guys have hacked, what they claim to have is 1 million small businesses under these MSPs. Managed service providers, they can go after all of them at once, or just a subset of them, and inflict economic harm. And the gamesmanship is how much economic harm over what period, versus just paying these guys and then trying to shore up your cybersecurity later. I do think it is amazing that these guys are asking for that much money, because the more money you ask for, the harder it is to launder. And when you talked about the FBI recouping some of the payoff made around the earlier Colonial Pipeline cyber attack, and the reality is, and I'm an investor in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies myself. The reality is that whole world of crypto payments is getting much more regulated and easier to track. And the technologies, there's at least half dozen companies that are completely dedicated towards analyzing these blockchains and all the transactions across them. It doesn't mean that money laundering is impossible. It just means that it's gotten a lot harder. So I think one of the economic limiting factors will be to how much they can ask for isn't just the economic harm that they can inflict once they get inside a system and paralyze it, but also how much money can they launder, how quickly, with what success rate.
Yeah, interesting stuff, and it's a trend we'll continue to monitor on this show, and I'm sure people will be talking about it for many years to come. Rob, thanks so much for taking some time with us today and sharing your expertise on vaccine passports and beyond. We sure appreciate it, and if people want to know more about your company, DeleteMe or Abine, how do they go do that?
Abine.com, ABINE.com, and joindeleteme.com, one word.
All right. Well, thanks so much again for your time. We sure appreciate it. And as we wrap up for this episode, I also want to thank our sponsors at Valcom. At Valcom, you get much more than a dedicated IT retailer. They become an extension of your IT team. Whether you're a startup or an enterprise, Valcom has the technical sales and engineering expertise to make your business more effective and more productive. Check them out, VLCM.com. That's VLCM.com. Also, special thanks to our supporting partners, the Utah Department of Technology Services, the Kim C. Gardner Policy Institute at the University of Utah, Secuvant, the Utah Attorney General's Office, and the Utah Department of Public Safety. You can follow us on Twitter at cyber24_, or you can follow us on Facebook. Hit us up in either place. Let us know what you think, or if you have a topic you would like us to discuss on a future episode. You can also rate and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts. We love those 5-star ratings. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend. Stay safe online.